Welcome to NeedlessSpace, the channel with fast, efficient guides that get straight to the point. In this video, we're going to be talking about Biomutant, and I want to go over the best psi powers in the game. These are going to either be the ones that are the most practical to use or the ones that are going to have the highest damage output. These are necessary things to know for anyone that has a psi freak build or anyone that actually wants to utilize the psi power abilities. We're going to use a ranking list. D tier is going to be at the very bottom for the worst, and S tier is going to be the best of the best. I do want to point out that acquiring these powers does not only use psi points, but you will have to get light and dark aura points as well. You don't have to be aligned all the way to one spectrum. If you just go to the psi powers list, it'll show how many points you have in each category. The best way to earn these points is to go around capturing the small critters in the world and either saving them to gain light points or killing them to gain dark points. You can also find caged up prisoners and do the same to them as well. So starting with tier D, the worst of the worst out of the psi powers. So the only one in this category is Blink. And Blink, it can be useful for builds that want to close the gap, like say a melee build. But the reason that it is so far down on the list is that because it uses so much Kai energy, and it's almost just the same as doing a dodge, or even a power that we cover later essentially does the same thing and then some. So really, Blink should not be one that's utilized in any scenario. Next is the C tier powers, and again there's only one power that made the list at C tier, and that is Levitate. So Levitate seems like a really cool power on paper, and it does look pretty neat, but there are a few setbacks while using Levitate. So you can't simultaneously use other powerful psi powers while levitating, and there's also gear in the world that essentially does the same thing that any character can utilize, like the Helipack backpack. It can be a good ability to get away from enemies fast, but even I have a pure psi freak build with no points in any sort of defense abilities, and I'm still able to take quite a few hits before my health is depleted. I don't think this one is necessary for any psi freak build. Again, it does look really neat, but not very useful. Next up is the B tier powers, and that is going to be Spark Ball and Sizzle Ball. So Spark Ball is the ability you get when you start Biomutant as a psi freak character, and Sizzle Ball is the alternative if you hadn't. Essentially, they do the same thing, just Spark Ball is electrified damage and Sizzle Ball is fire damage. This is a very straightforward damage dealing power, and it's great for anyone that wants to utilize psi powers as their main form of attack. A lot of people don't know either that you can actually charge up these balls to do a more powerful attack on your enemies. When you charge up the Spark Ball, it'll push close enemies away and deal a ton of damage. Very, very useful. Now the A tier psi powers. There's 3 psi powers that made this list, starting with Blaze. So this is the one I referred to earlier that is essentially a better form of Blink. You use less Kai energy than Blink, and you leave a trail of fire that damages enemies. Blaze is one that most players will use as psi characters. Even players that don't have a psi build will often pick up Blaze just to travel around the map even faster. It's great for crowd control or fight engagement. I usually just set some fire around on the ground before I start a battle. Next in the A tier is Freeze. This is a great power for crowd control. It freezes all enemies within a certain radius and also creates a slippery patch on the ground for any enemies that cross over afterward. It might not be very useful for quick fights that are going to be over fast, but if you are fighting against a group of higher level enemies or even around your level, this is great for setting up fights. And if you want to utilize your Wung Fu combos, this is perfect because you can freeze enemies in place and set up a combination on them as you please. Next in the A tier is Telekinesis. Telekinesis is great because it does deal damage on its own, but you can also toss enemies around however you want. You can hold them over fire to do even more damage. It's a very powerful ability, and any psi freak build will definitely want to have this in their arsenal. Next on the S tier list, we have 2 abilities that made it to the very top. The first one being Sky Spark. So this is one of the highest damage dealing abilities in the entire game. So any build that wants to utilize their powers as their main damage output wants to snatch this one up. There are only a few setbacks though. You do have to remain still while casting, and you have to be on the ground. You also cannot cast this one indoors, but I'm telling you, this one is still worth picking up as it does so much damage, and you want to utilize this one more in boss fights anyways, since it's such a high damage output, and nearly all boss fights are going to be outside anyways. You are susceptible to all sources of damage while trying to cast the ability, so you want to make sure you're clear of any enemies close by, and then cast it on larger targets. The other S tier ability fills what Sky Spark falls short at, and that's Kai Spark. This is essentially a closer range crowd control ability. You can attack multiple targets at one time, and it can stack up and do some insane damage. If you combine this with the Brain Drain perk, you're almost unstoppable. You will be healing yourself immensely while putting out intense damage to any enemies close by. You do have to be facing the direction of enemies. It won't work if they're behind you, but either way, just get clusters of enemies in front of you. You can take them out and then use the Sky Spark again on the bigger single target enemies. I will say the Kai Spark Brain Drain perk combination is probably one of the best combinations any Magic user can use in the entire game. Even at hard mode levels, you will essentially be immortal. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel for more. I will catch you guys in the next one, and as always, good luck and have fun.